Welcome to the Report. We'll rewatch and talk about every episode of the Colbert Report from 2005 to 2014. That's a lot of episodes. I'm Alex.
And I'm Nathaniel.
And Colbert's guest is Barry Roach. So this is the first episode we recorded after Colbert's 18th anniversary of first airing on October 17th.
Not a very significant anniversary, I would say.
I mean, 18 means, I guess, like, somebody could vote now that has never...
The show can vote, yeah.
Yeah.
But not smoke or drink.
No, I thought...
didn't the smoking thing get moved?
Yeah, I think it might have been, probably a lot of states did. So, we're going to get into the first segment.
Yep.
And this one, he calls his audience the wind you can lean against. It seems like there's a particularly long cheering period this time.
Yeah.
So he's talking about the White House press briefings. The Secretary, Scott McClellan. Seems like he stuck around until 2006. Yeah. I'm not sure how long press secretaries... He doesn't seem like they serve that long. Obama only had 2, which I guess might have...
Yeah, the picture he gets of him is funny. He looks very afraid.
As I said, he looks like he's about to crap his pants and burst into tears.
Yeah.
So asking about all of the Bush-era scandals, asking about the black sites currently.
The torture, I think.
Yeah, and he didn't want to answer it. And then comparing it to Terrell Owens' agent, Drew Rosenhaus, who was doing a press conference about him. He's represented Johnny Manziel later.
So he's has a history of representing, head cases?
Yeah. I said here, when the NFL almost went on strike, I said that the players he had got signed to, $600 million cumulative in contracts, so I imagine he got a lot from that.
So he's kind of almost a scummy agent?
I don't know if he's I mean, I feel like that's...
In a way.
Maybe, yeah. And, of course, he was much more combative than McClellan was. Because that's called reframing the argument.
Yeah.
And you wonder what the jobs for press secretaries before. It seems like they were pretty much always campaign advisors or communications directors. Okay. McClellan was a communications director and campaign advisor.
So I think major in communications and
I don't know.
That's what their pre-political career is.
Although Jay Carney, Obama's first press secretary, was a journalist. And so then he starts cutting the press conferences together with answers.
Yeah.
Of course, Helen Thomas was one of the big confrontational journalists in Bush's administration.
What happened to her?
I don't know. I know she died eventually. I think she had a controversy for saying something people thought was anti-Semitic. I forget, but I know the Correspondence Dinner, she filmed a skit with Colbert.
Okay, so she was well known at the time.
Yeah, definitely. But of course, with Rosenhaus, he would eventually just get tired of just saying next question.
Yeah.
If Rosenhaus actually called his book Next Question.
Yeah.
So yeah, he clearly liked doing that. So they cut a clip of somebody wanting him to apologize to the family of Wilson and Valerie Plame, with Rosenhaus saying he has said everything that needs to be said.
Yeah.
I know you were wondering how much of the show was just stitching together news clips, which probably a lot. I remember John Oliver saying that they used to actually have recordings of all the news clips, and they didn't even have a great categorization system, so they'd have to spend hours searching for the right clip.
Jeez, I hope they did better now.
Yeah, he said it was like they'd undergone the Ludovico technique from A Clockwork Orange, was his metaphor.
Yeah.
Although it seems like eventually they did get a transcript searching system, so by the time John Oliver was giving the interview, it was a lot easier. I assume maybe he must have transferred some of that over to his next show. So
it's hard to imagine a professional site, a professional show wouldn't categorize that stuff.
I mean, they might have, but maybe the technology was just...
It must be much easier now.
I know that nowadays they even have public archives that you can search for the news.
Is there a way to, filter out the funny ones?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure if how much of you can view because of the copyright or whatever, but you could do it.
Yeah.
So next, The Word.
Willie Loman.
From Death of a Salesman, in case you didn't know.
Yeah.
The Word was prompted by the fact that in the elections, which had happened on the previous day, Tuesday, I guess, the Republicans didn't win the governorships in New Jersey and Virginia. The winners would wind up being John Corzine and Tim Kaine.
Tim Kaine and...
Tim Kaine became the senator.
Yeah.
Okay. I think John Corzine mostly left politics after New Jersey. I think the thing that wound up embarrassing him the most was that he got into a pretty bad car accident as governor.
What's the pipeline for Virginia governor to senator look like?
I mean, it's pretty common, I think.
Because the governors only have one term.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to become a senator or something.
Yeah, I think it's pretty common.
Is New Jersey term limited?
No, New Jersey isn't.
So
I think a lot more states used to have no re-election for governors. I know Pennsylvania did for a while.
Yeah. Why did they change it to...
I think it's just that probably a lot of governors wanted to be able to run again.
And they were the ones in charge of making the laws about state elections?
Probably.
Okay.
Of course, there used to be weird things like Massachusetts used to have one-year terms for governors. There'd be an election every year. And he says what Bush was selling, voters weren't buying.
Yep. So
And
were the Republican candidates for both those races like Bush
I'm
types?
not sure, but I mean, it was point out he did campaign in Virginia, which
Ah,
makes sense given that Virginia had voted for Bush before, so he probably thought that he had to fear that him
yeah.
campaigning there wouldn't hurt.
Well, but hasn't Virginia only voted the governor of the same party as the president
Yeah, that's what I said.
once?
The only time recently it happened was with McAuliffe in 2013, so
Yeah.
it's probably not that easy.
Also, it's probably not too much work for the president to go to Virginia.
Yeah, that's probably the reason why he was campaigning.
Just
Yeah,
take the bus. Then
or whatever the president could take.
yeah, and then on to
Then
Arnold.
Arnold, because Arnold Schwarzenegger was also framed as one of the big losers,
Mm,
since he had 4 propositions that he supported were up for a vote in California.
yeah.
They were 74 to 77. 74 was that teachers would need 5 years for tenure instead of 2.
Mm,
75 prohibited public sector unions from campaign contributions. 76 was to make it easier to set spending limits on state budgets, like for schools. And 77 was some kind of redistricting reform thing.
okay.
It seems like he must have been sparring with the teachers' unions a lot, given how 3
Yeah.
of them seemed very specifically targeted at that.
And
But
that wasn't popular at
uh,
the
I
time,
mean,
I
of course,
guess.
also part of it is just that I imagine the teachers' unions are probably fairly powerful. So
Especially in California too,
yeah,
because they have the big school districts.
and so it seems like some people were suggesting another recall.
When was the first recall?
The first recall was, I guess, just the one that voted him in the first
And when was
place.
Arnold elected?
I think it's 2002.
Okay.
I'm going to have to look it
And he
up.
goes out of office in 2007,
It was 2011.
2011. Oh, so he served for a while.
Yeah, the recall was in 2003.
2003. So this would have been 2 years after that. And
Yeah.
was Jerry Brown the governor before him?
No, Gray Davis was the one that
Greg
had to step
Davis.
down, and then
Okay.
Jerry Brown.
Yeah.
They put out Jerry Brown on being both the oldest and one of the youngest governors in California history,
Yeah.
because California does have term limits, but I guess because they didn't when he was in the office for his first term, they decided they didn't count.
This is like the Lula of
Yeah, kind of.
California.
And Lula was also president at the time of this episode in Brazil. So
Yeah.
I was reading some of the speeches, I guess, McClellan and Bush were making, and he does come up a fair bit. So.
Yeah.
And then I mentioned maybe Gary Coleman could run again in the next recall, and he did indeed run in the previous recall.
Did he get close?
No, he definitely didn't get close. Of course, the thing is, the recall question is yes, no, and then if yes, who would you vote for?
Okay, so if you don't want to recall, it's like so if a Democrat's getting recalled, another Democrat's probably not going to win.
Probably not.
Arnold
Although it's, I think,
Arnold Schwarzenegger won with a decent amount of the vote.
oh, it seems. Oh, actually, no. I think it's not like an if yes thing. I think you check it off even if you vote no.
Okay.
But I think a lot of the Democrat it has all the other candidates. I know our dad wanted to run because he thought that because Schmidt was next to Schwarzenegger, a fair amount of people would see him on the ballot. Yeah, look it up. George P. Schwartzman did get a fair amount of votes, so
It probably would have worked.
I mean, it wouldn't have gotten him elected.
Well, no, but it would have gotten a fair amount of
Yeah,
votes.
Gary Coleman was
Eighth with 0.2% of the votes.
14,242.
And
Peter Uberoth and Larry Flint were both already fairly well known. So
what are they well known for?
Peter Uberoth ran was like on the committee for the LA Olympics, and Larry Flint was the publisher of Hustler magazine. So
that's why they
yeah,
ran. But Arnold is a loser because he didn't get any of his props passed.
yeah.
And California's the only state that does.
I think there are ones, but I'm guessing it's just that California does a lot because you don't need legislative support; you just need enough voters.
Okay, and that's built.
I don't think that it's the only state that does that, but because California is the biggest state that does
hear
it.
about it a lot.
I mean, California's the biggest state, period. But like, I don't think New York has it as easy to do as California.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and then Colbert moves on to attacking Arnold for not knowing how to be a salesman.
Yeah.
Bring it back to Willy Loman.
I mean, he hasn't even brought up Willy Loman yet, but it makes sense.
I mean, like, you know the word, what the word is.
Yeah. And of course, Colbert calls Arnold an all-American boy, and the word bullet is pumping irony.
Yeah.
And so he uses a clip from his State of the State speech where he says, I can sell any movie, and he points to Red Sonja and Last Action Hero, which I'm sure supposed to be his worst movies, but I definitely at the time they were kind of probably not his proudest moments. So they said he could sell just about anything.
Yep.
I'm wondering if that was the one thing that inspired the whole thing. So
yeah, but I think Colbert says that in those movies Arnold was selling himself, not politics, which evidently doesn't mix for him.
And he extols the virtues of salesmanship, saying there's nothing more American than a salesman. The word bullet point is sorry apple pie.
Yeah.
This take the great American play Death of a Salesman, and the bullet point is spoiler alert: the salesman dies. I was curious where spoiler alert came from. It seems like the internet did help make it popular a lot because people would headline post spoiler alert. The first one on Usenet I could find was from 1982. Doesn't seem like there are any newspaper ones from back then, so that might be close to the origin. I doubt it was the origin,
but like close to it.
Yeah,
it arose in the 80s, you could say.
And then as proof of Millard's salesmanship himself, he points to the fact that he married Marilyn Monroe.
How long do they last?
I don't think that long, but
Yeah.
her other celebrity husband was Joe DiMaggio.
Yeah. Both. Well, Joe DiMaggio is like kind of famously ugly, right?
Yeah, kinda. Then Colbert says there's one hard and fast rules in sales. The whole point is sell things. It's to know your product. Then it says, I mean, Schwarzenegger has been great at selling himself. He's not a great actor. And the example is he didn't believe he was pregnant in Junior.
Mm.
I would say he's not a great not as good of a bodybuilder because Lou Ferrigno has better deltoids.
Yeah.
Hulk is hunk, as it says. And the selling policy, but he was selling policy and not himself, so yeah, it's not as working as well. Bullhorn is Beethoven switch. I did want to look up what the German is, and
it is.
I'm not sure if there's an exact translation, but
Lockvogeltaktik.
Lockvogeltaktik is the one that they give a translation for, which means decoy bird tactic. So it would probably mean about the same kind of thing.
Very creative, as those Germans always are.
Yeah.
Why can't other languages just mash words together?
There are other languages. They're called agglutinative languages.
But German's the most famous one, right?
Yeah, probably.
I mean, they do it a lot.
Then he says that every man has a hole the size of a new product, and you got to jam it in there. And for a new product, you got to find a new hole. Mm-hmm. They definitely liked doing like the homoerotic innuendo type jokes early on. Yeah. So I don't think they ever really stopped, but
it's part of the character.
Yeah, he says that California has the same holes, and but Arnold didn't find it. Yeah. And then he applies it to George W. Bush too, saying that he sold us integrity and authenticity. There's the bullet point showed by wearing blue jeans. Yeah. But now we've got intellectualism, and Americans want to shop elsewhere, and the bullet point is the credibility gap. And
was there a credit gap issue?
The credibility gap was a term from Vietnam that Americans just weren't buying what the administration was saying anymore.
Okay.
I think there were a lot of gap type sayings from then, like the generation gap, which is what the Gap, the store, is actually named after.
So Gap was just in vogue in the 60s.
Maybe. I know about that because Snopes had like one of their pages was that there was apparently a rumor that it actually stood for gay and proud. Yeah.
It's funny.
And then he's told a story about his grandfather selling glass bottles. I must admit, I forgot to look up if this is based on anything true. And then it says to keep his job during the Depression, he would sometimes buy his unsold product so that the factory stayed open. And it said having to move them lit a fire under his ass. And then the bullet point is he drank a lot. Then saying, like, now we can start another war, saying, like, Iran and sell it later. It's kind of funny how long Iran has been the war that they want to make happen.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it has, but it hasn't. I honestly feel like even if there was a somewhat good reason, it probably wouldn't pass just because of how biased we are against it.
Also, Iran's a hard...
Yeah, Iran would not be nearly as easy as Iraq.
Iraq wasn't that easy.
Yeah.
Like, Iran's mountainous, it's bigger.
Yeah, it has a lot more people.
Yeah, better military, too.
Probably.
So, and, like, a spread-out population.
Yeah.
Some might call it the America of the Middle East.
Yeah.
No, I don't think anybody calls it that.
And then Arnold says that he's got to jam himself into more people's holes or jam his product.
Yeah.
That reminded me of, like, do you ever see the pictures of, like, Arnold Schwarzenegger's illegitimate child?
No, I have not.
Looks a lot like him.
Is it really his illegitimate child or no?
Yeah, it's definitely.
And, like, did he ever take credit or?
I think eventually I'll find the picture there. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, no, that looks like Arnold.
And I think this is the son, this is Arnold. But yeah.
It still looks like Arnold. I mean, it helps I couldn't tell which one was different.
Yeah. The next segment?
But I do believe also the last segment did end with attention must be paid as the last line.
It did.
Yeah, it's a nice little Death of the Salesman reference.
Oh, yeah, I missed that.
Yeah. Next section is All You Need to Know.
Which is the segment he's done before where he says, no matter how hard we journalists try, no amount of swooping graphics, scary sound effects, or bottom-of-the-screen info crawls can make every story work. So he's going to cut the meat of today's story down into chunks that a child can swallow.
Yep.
And so the first one is Kansas, the State Board of Education, allowing intelligent design to go forward. Schools.
Was this part of, like, Kansas's, like, radical, deregulation?
No, that was after 2010.
Okay.
I think they might have elected a Democrat between 2006 and 2010.
So that's why they'd like to... Was that, like, did the Tea Party
get in charge? The Tea Party then got in charge in 2010, and they were elected in 2014, but yeah, Brownback was pretty unpopular. He did leave in order to take a job under the Trump administration, but...
Yeah. Does Colbert, like, the character go fully Tea Party by then? Or is he
I think he does like the Tea Party. Like, I don't think he's ever going to dislike some new Republican thing.
Okay.
They were pointing out it might have been kind of a shame because I feel like he probably would have been supporting Trump before any actual Republicans were, but just because it would be the thing his character would do.
Yeah.
They had actually held the hearings all the way back in May of that year.
And
I think they kind of approved it.
Is this law still in effect in Kansas?
No, as I said, I found out in 2007, the Board of Education reversed their decision.
Okay.
So, and I know eventually there would be the Supreme Court case saying that intelligent design was religious enough that it couldn't be taught in schools. So, I guess the reason why they're calling it intelligent design is that it would be any specific religion. They just said that there was likely a creator.
Yeah, but it's been struck down. Next news story, North
No,
Korea?
not yet.
Not
because I just wanted to say that he's saying is all that you need to know about Kansas or in Kansas is very little.
Yep.
Another thing that came out of those hearings was that the flying spaghetti monster came because in January the person submitted a recommendation to the Board of Education saying that his belief in the flying spaghetti monster should be acknowledged in schools too.
So that's
where the whole thing happened.
So this is where it started?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Nice tidbit.
And the next one is in North Korea. There was little progress on the nuke talks. There were the six-party talks. They called them. It was it goes China, Japan, South Korea, America.
It's 6 parties.
Yeah. The first nuke would be on October 2006. Seems like they still continue the talks in 2007, but yeah, they didn't really do anything.
Did they ever go anywhere?
I don't know.
No.
I mean, I'm not sure what kind of leverage you would actually have on North Korea to make them give up nukes, but
yeah,
I guess
China might have leverage, but
And so what Colbert said, all you need to know is he just played a clip from Duck and Cover, the film, which was which was from 1951. I think the cover part is just that you had to cover your back or something. I know.
Would that stop radiation burn? Or what?
I don't think it would. I know Larry Gonick, who went to school during that time, thought that was particularly ridiculous. He's author of the cartoon guide and the cartoon history books, and in one of the books he has remember kids, put your hands over your neck so that they'll be incinerated first.
There's no logic to that, right?
I don't think so. And probably a little bit of ducking and covering would work, but
not the hands.
Yeah. To be fair, I'm not sure if what they were expecting was the shockwave or the heat itself.
Yeah.
I mean, the shockwave itself, ducking and covering would probably not be a bad idea, but
yeah. I mean, I guess I could see you don't want if it's your heat and it's not directly in the blast. Maybe you want to avoid getting your neck burned. And
also, probably in 1951, they thought the bombs the Soviets would have wouldn't have been that big. And then he goes on to avian flu, saying some clinics can't meet vaccine demand. Well, the thing is, checking it was that it seems like they had the similar stories from the year before. So I'm not sure if it was particularly relevant. And then it says all you need to know is your leader is in perfect health. And they have a picture of Bush getting a vaccine. And I'm not sure if the flu. I know that Bush did get a smallpox vaccine because he was concerned that terrorists would steal the smallpox samples.
And he wasn't vaccinated for smallpox as a child?
I think he might have been, but maybe he got a new one. I don't know.
Yeah.
I assume he probably would have been vaccinated for smallpox as a child. So
wouldn't the terrorists just use anthrax or something?
Yeah, in 2001 there was somebody that sent a bunch of anthrax to people. They think he was somebody that worked at a biological research facility, but he killed himself before they could ever stand trial, so I don't think we really know.
Oh, okay. I feel like smallpox would not be my way to assassinate a president.
Yeah, probably not. And then he talked about oil price gouging hearings. The prices were $2.37.6 per gallon at the time.
Yeah.
Which was pretty low. It had gone up, I think it was about within $1 in the beginning of Bush's term.
Yeah.
And although it had actually fallen quite a bit from previous weeks, maybe they let prices go down just to make it not as much of an issue for the hearing. I don't know.
Yeah.
And so he teaches you how to siphon gas.
Yeah.
By sucking it out of the...
What does he use for the actual thing? The actual gas, because it's not actual gas.
I know, you were wondering what the liquid was. You thought it might have been apple juice, and that wouldn't surprise me.
Something that color.
I know the other fun fact is I don't think we quite know how siphons actually work.
No, we don't.
Yeah, it seems like there have been things that could explain it, but when they've eliminated those in experiments, it still kind of works, so it must not be just that.
Is there anything to do with air pressure? Have we tried to use a siphon?
I mean, air pressure is part of it, but I think it works in a vacuum sometimes too.
So it's just weird.
Maybe. And then for the black sites, he says all you need to know is you don't need to know.
Yep, because the black sites were confirmed eventually, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And now we're on to the interview with Mary Roach, who is promoting her book Spook, Science Tackles the Afterlife. All of her books are one word and a colon, except for some reason one was called Packing from Mars, The Curious Science of Life in the Void, 2010, which, I mean, why did you break the formula? I mean, to be fair, I'm not sure how we can fit that title into...
Maybe it's packing, comma...
No, it's definitely spelled.
Well, maybe it was in her mind. Maybe the publishers got it wrong.
Maybe.
Packing for Mars.
Yeah, she's still writing books. I think the latest one called Fuzz or Fuzzy is in 2021. So
yeah,
and so Colbert makes finger guns on the way down to
which is I think a new one.
Maybe Colbert starts off by saying that he's not a big fan of death, and that if he doesn't want to die, what are his options?
Yeah.
Maybe this is foreshadowing cheating death, one of the many iconic Colbert segments that hasn't showed up yet.
Yep.
And so after she just suggests to not do risky things, he asks 5 words or less what happens in the afterlife. She says very, very boring from what I understand, which is 7 words. words, so I don't think she understood the memo.
No, she did not.
Maybe the varies don't count because they're not.
She could have just said very boring.
Yeah. It says that from her mediums that she knows that it asked questions of the dead, and one of them is like, is there sex in the afterlife? And she says, I've heard that there's not.
Oh.
But I don't know how you can trust that. And when Colbert asks her about hell and heaven, and if there's an afterlife-oscope, she says, no, there's an afterlife-ometer.
Yeah.
I know then you're wondering if she was like somebody that actually like seriously 100% believed in ghosts, but I doubt it, at least from further work.
Yeah. So is her thing she's just doing like taking a scientific like data collection approach to
the afterlife, I guess.
To stuff like to questions like this to see where that can take us.
And then she talks about how when people would report ectoplasm showing up at seances, it would turn out to be cheesecloth or sheep entrails.
Could it be anything else ever? Or no?
I mean, probably. Yeah. I imagine that was just one instance that she talked about.
Yeah.
And so then she mentions the famous experiment where they would weigh people dying from tuberculosis, and then they said that they lost 21 grams when they died. And she points out it was like the movie, and the movie 21 grams would come out in 2003, so it probably was more remembered at the time.
I'm sure, though, that like your bodily functions not happening accounts for...
Yeah, probably. I know they wondered if some of it could have been like the involuntary bodily discharges that happen, although those would probably stay on the scale.
Yeah.
I think from what I remember seeing something about it on TV was that he wanted to prove that humans had souls and animals didn't.
But I assume did the same thing happen to the animals?
I guess like he claimed they didn't, but Colbert says, wait, when you die you lose weight. Let's make sure you're not selling a diet book because those are popular. And I says, I wouldn't have expected it because have you ever been a pallbearer? Dead people are heavy.
I assume that's mostly coffin, right?
Yeah. That again attacks the intellectual Ivy League people. Well, she points out she went to Wesleyan and not an Ivy League school. And Colbert asks, where do scientists get off saying what happens after death?
It's kind of in the description. Well, I guess saying what happens, maybe not after death. Probably most scientists don't consider that.
Yeah, most consider it scientists, unless you can resurrect somebody. I don't think most scientists would have any serious way of...
I'm sure they'd be very happy to resurrect people.
Yeah, they probably would. Colbert says, I want to believe I'll become a zombie ruler of the night and feast on human flesh. And Colbert, of course, declares, I nailed ya, which is his thing.
Does that continue throughout the...
I know he has a segment called Nailed Him about people that went to jail for stupid reasons, but I'm not sure if that's quite the same
Does he keep it up in the interviews, though?
I think he might keep it up a little bit.
Because so far in his interviews, his main concern is nailing people.
Yeah.
Did he get that from Stone Phillips?
I'm not sure if that's a specific person, but I wouldn't want to be that surprised.
How much is Colbert a specific parody of Stone Phillips?
I don't think... I mean, he's more of Bill O'Reilly.
But, like, he does have, like, the look of Stone Phillips.
Maybe. But I mean, a lot of it just that Colbert looks more like him than Bill O'Reilly.
Yeah.
I think Bill O'Reilly is a fair bit older than Colbert, so...
Yeah.
Colbert asks her if she believes in ghosts, and she's not sure. Then she brings there's some craziness in the studio. She wants to call up the spirits of the past. Colbert, and so they bring in Jon Stewart as the spirit of the past. I mean, he does do like the handoffs between the shows, but this is the first time he's showed up as himself.
And he does do a little ghost.
I mean, in the main segment,
they do give him like a little ghost filter. And...
Yeah, and then he asks him why the walls are pretty. He says, "It's a problem with the masonry." And Colbert asks if anything strange was happening. Oh, because, it did used to be the Daily Show studio before Colbert moved in.
Yeah.
That's the context.
So where did the Daily Show go?
It went to another studio.
On the same building or different?
It's a different building.
Different building?
Yeah.
I assume most studios have other studios in the building, right?
Yeah, I think maybe. I mean, I'm not sure if these ones do. I mean, 30 Rock does, of course.
But it's like NBC.
Yeah, I mean, these are smaller. So.
Yeah, but I assume for like the big news companies.
Yeah. Jon Stewart then says, oh yeah, we did build this place in an Indian burial ground, and of course says probably at then, and Jon Stewart goes away saying, I'm your secret Santa.
Yeah.
And then the last segment, Better Know a District.
With John Micah.
Who was from Florida's 7th District.
Which includes Daytona Beach, or included Daytona Beach. And St. Augustine. Does it currently include both those towns?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if the numbering is even consistent.
Isn't the 7th now like the district on the highway in by Jacksonville?
Maybe. I'm not sure.
Like the real snaky one?
I'm not sure if they're quite as snaky anymore, but...
Well, before I guess they made to redraw it, but...
I mean, the current districts are gerrymandered, but I'm not sure if they have, like, the...
No,
currently it looks all fairly reasonable.
Yeah.
At least from the outside, but you can still gerrymandering.
But it does not contain Daytona Beach as far as I can tell.
And so there is actually a frac, but for some reason it's almost a separate segment. Yeah. And it's OK and Coca-Cola are some of the best known words in the world, and that's good because they're American words.
Yeah, is that true about those words?
I mean, they probably are pretty well known.
Yes, I mean, I assume Coke's synonymous with like soda everywhere.
I'm not sure if it's literally like it is in the South, but yeah.
Like Coca-Cola, I mean.
Yeah.
Like, just everybody, probably at most places know what
Yeah.
Coca-Cola is.
And then he starts pointing to districts, but he's actually picking the wrong districts.
Yeah.
They actually kind of realized it because the first one is Missouri's 8th congressional district, and that one has like the boot heel of Missouri, and I recognized that shape, so I did kind of wonder. Although I didn't notice immediately.
What makes the difference between a boot heel and a panhandle?
I think they just call the Missouri one.
Okay.
I mean, it's also a little smaller than most
Panhandles.
Seems like the main reason why is just that somebody that there would have like the most powerful people in Missouri had like land that was across the border, and he wanted it to be kept intact.
So I guess he got what he wanted.
Yeah. Then he pulls up California's 3rd district. Then he pulls up Wyoming, and he says that's an easy one because Wyoming only has one district.
Yep. It is easy. I could tell right away.
I mean, it can't be Colorado because Colorado had multiple congressional districts back then. So,
but then he does show us the Florida 7th
district, the fighting 7th, I assume, because
he calls them all fighting.
Yeah,
whatever.
I know later he does a similar segment about authors that he's talking about, and he calls them the Wrighton, like the Wrighton Salinger. And so the fact is, St. Augustine, the oldest city in America, second Jamestown.
How much? It's what, 40 years older than
Jamestown?
So. Was St. Augustine continuously inhabited?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. And then he talks about how Ponce de Leon was looking for Fountain of Youth, and he found just some malarial swamp.
Was there any value in St. Augustine?
I think so, as a military.
It was like to make the British mad?
I mean, they have the fort there, but
yeah.
I'm not sure if the British were quite that big of a player in the 1570s yet.
Yeah, well, I assume later on the Spanish were glad to have it.
And of course, when the British captured Florida after the French and Indian War, it did become a British fort briefly.
Yeah. So. They still call it St. Augustine? Or?
I'm not sure. I mean, the fort was called Castillo de San Marcos, but I don't know.
So the British renamed it St. Augustine?
No, that was the fort. I'm not sure if I think the British did rename the fort, but I forgot what to. I'm not sure if they renamed the city. I'm going to guess not.
Okay.
Daytona, Colbert talks about, has fast cars and hot teen vomit.
Yep.
Spring break still moving along, but and he brings up this change of ground law again, which again I just find it kind of funny given how big of a deal ended up coming out of it from the George Zimmerman, Trayvon Martin shooting, that it was even back then they knew that it was kind of asking for trouble.
Florida still has those laws, right?
I assume it still has that law because I don't think anybody would.
Florida still has the strongest standard ground laws in
not sure.
Country.
I wouldn't be surprised if they changed it a little bit after and so then he calls his district the Gaza Strip of the Atlantic, and then it says the similarities are striking, and it has a map of like Gaza within Israel and the towns of Florida, and it has an area marked Jews to the
away
south,
from it.
Yeah. He says that John Mike has the tenacity of an alligator in a garage during a hurricane, which of course turns out
I assume that happens all the time in Florida, right?
Yeah. Like the thing is that John Micah is like probably one of the most boring of the ones.
Oh, he's so boring.
Yeah. He makes jokes about it.
Yeah.
And so and I imagine he probably had to cut down the interview quite a bit just because he couldn't get that much good material out of it.
He just doesn't say anything. He just kind of sits there and just like.
Yeah. So he points out in his first election, there were no names appearing on the ballot.
Yeah, so he just won.
Yeah. Or maybe not his first election. I think it was like the election before this one.
So even his name didn't appear on the ballot, or
maybe.
So they just gave him the seat because nobody.
I will have to check for more, but yeah, I say.
So I assume the district isn't very competitive then.
Yeah, or it wasn't.
Yeah.
And so saying, did you get 0% of the ballot or 100% of the ballot? And he says he never thought about that. But he said, at least it's Chad free. And then Micah says, well, it's better to get 100% than have the Supreme Court decide. So it's kind of funny. I guess the Republicans were admitting that the Supreme Court could have given it to Gore if they wanted to, which I feel like. I mean, I'm not sure if they quite would.
I think they're just mad that the Supreme Court got involved in a way.
Yeah. And so he brings up the issue of John Micah saying that he always favored arming pilots.
Because was he a pilot?
I'm going to guess maybe just because he's, as is later revealed, he chaired the aviation subcommittee, but that wouldn't be surprised. Colbert asked if he would have liked to train flight attendants, and he said yes, and Colbert said, I liked those sexy flight attendants. A flight attendant with a pistol would be pretty hot.
Mm-hmm. And I think Steve Micah just agrees.
Yeah.
But also, we never armed flight attendants even after 9/11?
I mean, they do have air marshals, but I feel like arming flight attendants probably wouldn't.
Or if, pilots?
Yeah, honestly, I'm not sure if you'd even done, probably.
I'm just surprised, because you think that's, one of the post 9/11 things they do.
But I feel like the thing is, they put on the most prison guards usually aren't armed because of the chance that the gun could be taken.
Yeah.
So that probably.
Okay. That's why they don't do it.
And then he asks him, does he have to take off his toupee at the airport because it's like a weapon that could run free of the plane?
Yeah, his toupee is pretty egregious.
Yeah.
It's pretty obvious he's wearing fake hair.
Yeah. And then he brings up...
Are toupees made of real hair?
Probably depends. Then he asks if his x-ray can see through clothes. The no, he said it was because he supports the X-ray
Yeah.
machines that could go all the way through your clothes. So Colbert puts on those like fake X-ray specs, and John asked John Mike if he's okay with it, and
Did Colbert have those? I guess he had those in his pocket the whole time, waiting for the opportunity.
Then he brings up a statement where he compared welfare recipients to alligators.
Yeah.
Tell you something I should have looked up too. But then Colbert's comment is they both make beautiful luggage. Then he talks about a criticism of Baltimore, asks, do liberals make good crackheads?
And I think, does Micah say yes, or does he say... he just doesn't give it any interesting answers.
Yeah.
He really just I don't...
I'm guessing that Colbert just kept in the best questions he could come up with, even if he didn't get great responses. And then probably the best one is that he says, you have been described as flamboyant, and he says, they don't know me. I see we should be a trap because it'd be a pretty easy way of insinuating he was gay.
He completely evades the question. He's just like, they don't know me.
And then Colbert says, well, I was the one that described it as I honestly kind of wonder if he came up with that on the spot, because that would be kind of a fun one.
Yeah. It'd be funny if Mikey said, yes, that's true.
Yeah.
Colbert also does a bit where he yawns during the interview.
Yeah. And then you asked how long he was the chair of the House Subcommittee on Aviation, and it seems like it was 2001 to 2007.
Yeah.
And 2007 was done because the Democrats got back the House.
Yeah.
But then the Republicans got back the House. He became chair of the Transportation Committee for 2 years. So
and then he was voted out in 2014?
No, he wouldn't be voted out until 2016.
Until 2016.
Yeah.
And he hasn't done anything since?
I don't think so.
Ah.
And then asked about the Daytona, and he says, are you a fan of driving in circles? And he asks, why do the girls go wild? I don't think he has a response for either of those. He says they're just having a good time.
Said, which is the funniest thing, because he's just so boring, just dry.
Yeah, and so then he points out that if he keeps doing one per week, he'll be finished by February 2014.
Which, if he did one per week, would be within when the show finishes.
Although maybe there would have been weeks on break that wouldn't have counted.
Yeah.
But of course, he ever really came close, because Nancy Pelosi told Democrats not to go on the show.
Yeah.
Eventually, when they did their interview, she agreed to let them back on, and so he started doing it again.
Yeah. And what was that, 2010?
I forget the exact timeline, but probably sometime around then.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the show. Signing off.
Signing off.